We're going to move on with continuing the great conversation and presentations that we had so far this afternoon. Our second keynote speaker is Lee Bey. Lee is architectural critic for Chicago Sun-Times and a member of the Sun-Times editorial board, where he writes editorials on governance, neighborhood development, politics, and urban planning. Bey is the author of the book Southern Exposure: The Overlooked Architecture of Chicago's South Side, which showcases his architectural photography and social commentary. He's also the main photographer of the book, Who is the City For? Architecture, Equity, and the Public Realm in Chicago, written by Blair Kamin. Bey is currently working on a book about the architecture of Chicago's West Side. His photography of the built environment has appeared in New York Times, Architectural Digest, and several other national and international publications. He's also the host of the public television special, Building Blocks: The Architecture of Chicago's South Side, which aired on WTTW in 2023, for which he earned a 2023 Midwest Emmy nomination. He's worked as Director of Media and Government Affairs for the Chicago office of Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, Executive Director of Chicago Central Area Committee, and Deputy Chief of Staff for Architecture and Urban Planning under Chicago Mayor Richard M. Daley. An adjunct professor at the Illinois Institute of Technology, College of Architecture, he is the recipient of the 2021 Julius Shulman Institute Excellence in Photography Award and the 2019 Distinguished Service Award by the Chicago chapter of the American Institute of Architects. Everyone, please, let's welcome Lee Bey to the stage.
All right, thank you everyone, and good afternoon. I know not to be up here a long time because I think most of you have eaten, and people tend to get sleepy after that. So I don't want to have you guys snoring on me. So 1973, right? We're going to go back in time a little bit before we go forward, and because with the way I am with technology, we may go forward before we go backwards. But let's see. 1973. I was there. I wasn't trucking, but I was there. I would have been 8 years old, thereabout, in 1973. And, what an incredible time for the city it was. I mean, it was a city, as it always is, a city in transition. It was throwing off much of its old self in terms of urban planning and architecture, and in some respects, the way communities are treated, and really taking on kind of a new garb. So you had this thing where downtown was being remade under Richard J. Daley, the old man, as he's still called. And so you had a bright new city downtown of skyscrapers, John Hancock Building, Sears Tower, all of those places. But before we get into that, let's get a little bit into the culture. This is Expo 73. Like, what was life in Chicago like back in 73 for those who weren't born yet? Here's a brother at the old International Amphitheater, which is no longer with us, getting his game together with these two lovelies. And I guess is that a Mercury Montego? I don't know, but some kind of Mercury automobile that probably got like 3 miles to a gallon. Second City. Bernie Salen's in the middle, Del Close to the right there. I forgot the guy's name with the beard, who's on the left. But Second City is hitting its stride in 1972, just a little bit more of the cultural landscape of the city. Steve Goodman, late great Steve Goodman, singer, performing in Old Town here as well. Also part of the Chicago's cultural landscape. I love this. This is the great John White, Pulitzer Prize-winning Chicago photographer, Sun-Times photographer, who's still with us and still turning out good work. This is a scene from the Bud Billiken Day Parade. I I like the kind of the the afros I'm partial to, but the kind of Marie Antoinette sister in the back there in the gold hair. I like her too. Also a time of change. I mean, this is the Mexican-American community talking about protesting the conditions of Froebel School, a school in Pilsen, and their work to build and push for another high school ends up giving us Juarez High School a few years later. So, you know, you've got voices and people, particularly people of color, that are in this mix, 1973. You know, keep in mind that the activism of the 60s are not that far behind. And some of that spirit carries on into the 60s, into the 70s. A new West Side, a new near West Side. These are houses near Taylor and maybe Hoyne, maybe a little bit further east than that, that are coming up in 1973. So the built environment is changing. And through urban renewal, we are losing a lot. This is a great, oh, look at this building. Look at the base of that building. This is at 49th and Lakeshore Drive. Since this is not the University of Chicago I'm speaking of, believe me, we can have a whole other symposium on the evil that place has done and pushed for. Maybe they all are, in many respects, universities. I'm thinking about Maxwell Street in the 90s here, but that's another symposium. But they're all culpable in some way or another, but certainly 49th and Lake Park would have been better off keeping this building than whatever is there now. You know, the idea that the city has to remake itself, wants to remake itself, is being pushed largely by downtown business interests and Mayor Daley, Richard J. Daley. This is the Chicago Central Area Plan. This great model. So all of the buildings that are in white, I believe, are plans for the central area. The area roughly around North Avenue, a little bit north, Cermak or thereabout to the south, and the lake, and maybe sort of Ashland to the west. The idea is that this part of the city was aged, including downtown, old, aged. To put it very frankly, I mean, this is the part of history that we have to make sure that we embrace, that we address, because we have to correct it. It was becoming too black and too brown. So what do? You create a new city that's a little bit less, a little bit black, a little bit less brown. This is the Chicago 21 plan, again, a protest against it. Here, Pilsen, big business wants to move into your wants to move into our neighborhood. The Chicago 21 plan, put together by Daley, and the Chicago Central Area Committee, which oddly enough, in the early 2000s, I used to head, but not during these days. The idea, again, that these edges of the city, and we see it come to play when Lincoln Park was forcibly switched from predominantly Puerto Rican to far less predominantly so during this time. That around the edges of downtown, you had these kind of things happening because there was fear, and there's no other way to put it, among the city leaders that this blight, code word for what we all know, was going to encroach upon and ruin this downtown, so better to kind of trim it around the edges. And it created, out of this fear, out of this whole thing, some pretty bad policies were created. But luckily, again, the activism of the 60s are at play. People are beginning to fight against it. And it's funny, the more things change, the more they remain the same. This is a mural in Pilsen, still pressing against the same issues then, fighting against the same issues then as they are now. Again, here's a Sears Tower. I can't call it Willis Tower. I can't say that. A Sears Tower coming up. Great photograph, because what you've got in the background, far background to the left there, is the recently completed Johnny Hancock building, although I guess now that's 850 North. See, nothing changes this thing. That's recently completed, maybe only about 4 years old at the time. Sears in the middle, and the Amoco building, now Aon Center, kind of finishing off there. So this photograph gives you a sense of what Chicago was like, downtown Chicago was like during the time. There's another picture of the Amoco building, Standard Oil building as it was built as, had the nickname Big Stan. I don't think they ever took, but that's what it was called at least. And that Carrara marble that they're cladding it with, many of you know they had to take it all off and replace it with granite because marble and anchors don't sometimes work in this climate that we're in. $80 million. Can you believe that? The cost to erect the whole building, they had to spend again to reskin it. But it's only money, right? So where are we now? And where do we go over the next 50 years? You know, one of the things that came out of the central area plan was this concept, this isn't it, but this is a part I forgot to say, was this concept for South Loop Newtown. Idea of a new town in the South Loop. That became Dearborn Park. Central Area Plan also, again, looking back 50 years, called for some things that were good, which was preserving the housing stock, preserving the classic buildings that are there. You know, creating a new central library and improving transit, particularly transit to O'Hare. All these important things. So, with all of that as background, what should we look at? What's next? What's good? Where should the city go in the next 50 years? Just a few areas. One is that we've got to think about transit in a far more significant way. Yes, the buses have to come on time. Dorval Carter, God bless the brother, his name is like a byword and a taunt around my house with my kids. But the slow buses and the ghost buses are an example of a larger problem, which is not only does public transit in Chicago have to be better invested in over the next 50 years, but obviously better operated in a better way. One thing that's kind of a light in this is the extension of the Red Line. This is one of the proposed stations, a rendering of what it might look like along the line. This is a plan, as many of you know, to extend the Red Line, which currently stops at 95th Street, which, you know, and the city goes far beyond it. So it's like sleeping in a bed with the sheet too short, right? So the idea is to extend it to 130th Street, all the way into or near Altgale Gardens at the city's edge. This is transit equity. It provides transit for areas that don't clearly have a clean connection, a quick connection downtown. The problem, the risk, and this is where we're going to have to get into the idea of pure city planning to go along with this, is that the L will run through some of the emptiest parts of Chicago. And so in order to keep keep this new extension of $4 billion, to keep it from running empty trains to the Calumet River and back, essentially, there are going to have to be new communities built and maintained along the line. That is a big lift for a city that's never really done that. A city, particularly that far south. Usually what happens is that if you get too far south, too far west, Chicago will just let you drift, right? But now, the city, for the first time in its history, has to do something about it. And so whether this becomes a impetus for that, a push for that, the seeds of that, whether it becomes just, a nothing, a boondoggle, this is what has to be decided now and into the next 50 years. We have to take better care of the rivers. Rivers are coming back, particularly the main branch on its own. There's the River Walk, started under Richard M. Daley, pushed forward a lot under Rahm Emanuel. This is an idea of people kayaking. I remember when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s, you didn't want that river water touching you. And if you're doing something and it got on your tongue, you go, I'm poisoned, I'm dead. And now the idea is to kayak in it and swim in it. I even saw a guy fishing in it. I remember when Richard J. Daley, the old man, talked about fishing in the river, and they laughed at him. But now I wouldn't eat the fish, mind you. But the fact that there are fish even living in the river is a testament to how far things have come. And it's good. I mean, we have to be, this is our second waterway and significant in so many ways. And we have to make sure that it's treated that way and less like a commodity. This is the proposed Bally's Casino, which I've said it in the Sun-Times, so I don't mind saying it here. It'll never get built. There's a bet you can make. It'll never get built. You're gonna look back on this day when you're old and you say, that crazy Lee Bey. He said a lot of stuff, but this part was true. It'll never get built. And I said this before the hotel disappeared. It has to find a new home. The hotel, after they got the plan development approved for it, it turns out there are important water pipes underneath there that they should have known about and didn't, and now they have to figure out a new place to put that giant hotel. And of course, that with the problems that Bally's having financially, and if someone meets me at the door on the way out, I'll know you're from Bally's. I think the whole thing is at risk. What is good or potentially good is that you can see there's some action happening along the river, and the city, particularly under the previous planning commissioner, did make sure that you could enjoy the river without having to go through the casino first, or the theater. But we got to stop this. We have to stop this kind of way of looking at the river. Or this. This is the 78 site, which all of a sudden, lo and behold, the White Sox want to put a baseball stadium there. That's 2 streets, 2 stops down from their current stadium, which we're still paying for. And they want us to pay for this one too. And it's right by the river, as you can see to the left there. The river is almost it's almost like a side character in this. The idea is if someone from related development meets me at the door, then I'll know. But this is the kind of thing I think that has to stop. There's no reason for a baseball stadium to go there in a way that benefits the public. And I think that this is the kind of thing. Thank you. I think this is the kind of thing that we have to stop over the next 50 years is stop looking at these open spaces, again, as these commodities. Which brings us to you know what? It brings us there. So Chicago has been really good when it wants to be about building museums, about using its public space and using its open space, building museums in the park. This is the Noterbird Nature Center in Lincoln Park, and of course there's the Art Institute in Grant Park and the DeSable Museum in Washington Park. I mean, oftentimes it's a good match to put these cultural institutions in park spaces. But I think we got to stop. I think it's time to push away from the table. This is the Obama Library, which is under construction. This isn't finished. Did I bring it what it looks like? I don't think I brought a construction photo with me. A fantastic asset for the South Side, but if you ask an architecture critic, he will tell you that it's just in the wrong place. And there it is. That tower is 200 plus feet tall. So that's taller than a Monadnock building. It's taller than, if many of you live far south like I do, and you're going down the Bishop Ford Expressway and you see that US Bank building, tall building at 111th, looks like a skyscraper that got lost. There was a skyscraper foot race downtown and this one got lost. Got to 111th and said, I'm tired, I'm staying here. This building, and you see how large it looks, that tower looks, standing by the expressway there. This building is around 60 feet taller than that. So it's a huge thing. And I think we have to, and it was in a park, built in a park, a portion of Jackson Park, that, as one of my daughters put it, wasn't bothering nobody. I think we got to stop this. We have to stop this. Parks and open spaces in Chicago are supposed to be what Alfred Caldwell, the great landscape architect who gave us Montrose Point and Promontory Point and the Alfred Caldwell Garden in Lincoln Park. It was supposed to be for people who he said, the people without Buicks, right? The people who didn't have the ability to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city to their private places, in Sag Harbor or near Michigan City, but right here in the city. And we are not upholding that and treating it like this. Over the next 50 years, we have to stop. Which brings us to this. Soldier Field. Now, the one that's there is there, and my sin is when I worked for the mayor's office, I was part of the team that it was already put there, so don't put that on me. But my job was to get it built, help to get it built on time, and to trim that east side down so that the seating bowl didn't loom over Lakeshore Drive like impending death. So that was 20 years ago. And that's about the lifespan of these things. So now the Chicago Bears, after not putting their stadium in Arlington Heights, bought Arlington Heights Racetrack, demolished it, and decide, as many of you might remember, if you remember Emily Latella from Saturday Night Live, just decided, never mind. Now wants to put a dome stadium here in this surface parking lot, this big circle right in the middle. Who does that serve? It serves the Bears. But is the public itching and scratching for a stadium to be there? I'm going to say no. And what has to happen is from City Hall, you've got Friends of the Parks, you've got Parks advocates, you've got people like yourselves who are advocating for these spaces. But over the next 50 years, again, we've got to be more vigilant, we've got to be more direct. We have to send messages to people who make these decisions that this is not good. A domed stadium that might be 70,000. There's even talk about hotels right there on the lakefront. That'll never happen. But the fact that it's being proposed is shame on its own. Lastly, I think we have to bring good design and good urban planning to the south and west sides, to the neighborhoods. This is one of my favorites. This is, sorry I couldn't get my name off of it. It was in my book, right? And somehow I put the copyright thing on there. But this is one of the bridges, I think this is 41st Street, one of the bridges over Lakeshore Drive. My good buddy Blair Kamen, when he was at the Tribune, wrote 20 years ago or more about the need to better connect the communities of the south side, north of Hyde Park, south of downtown, to the lakefront. And finally, in the recent decade or so, it's beginning to happen. And rather than just some crazy wooden footbridge, it's actually, by my view, given what a bridge must do these days, how accessible it must be, it's actually a pretty good-looking addition. So we have to do this with bridges and infrastructure and schools and L stations and all that. All of that has to be important to let the city know. One of the things that when Richard J. Daley, the old man, got elected, the story goes he went to Abraham Lincoln Marovitz. That's a name for you, isn't it? Who was a judge in Chicago, Abraham Lincoln Marovitz. And he said, what should I do? And the judge told him, put the people's money on the street where they can see it. And that has to happen here as well. We've got to solve these other problems, crime and homelessness. We've got to solve those things. But now and again, you have to do something like this. You have to put the people's money on the street where they can see it. And that comes through better design schools, better design bridges, better design L stations, all those kind of things. All the more important, particularly as we begin to build out the south and west sides. Very quickly, as we get to the end, preservation is important. Here's a great project that's part of what is or was part of the Mayor Lightfoot's Invest Southwest program. Part of it was to restore and add housing and other functions kind of out of the frame there to the old Laramie State Bank right there at Chicago and Laramie. What a fantastic building. If you've never seen this building in person, go to it. Might be some scaffolding around it now. And the terracotta has gold pieces and people working and saving. I mean, it's a really beautiful building that's been vacant for years, decades. And now it's going to be coming back. This is the kind of thing we can make it happen at Randolph and State, but we got to make it happen here at places like Laramie and Chicago. And lastly, the environment. We got to think about that in a more significant way. We got to plant more trees, which I know doesn't sound like the sexiest thing, but trees. We all know that the transformative quality they have in terms of improving, reducing heat islands and improving the oxygen we breathe, all those things. And fixing an inequity. This is Old Town. This looks great. This is near Wells. If you go, to, 39th, 41st and Wells, the streets are as bare as the back of my hand. This has to stop. And that is the end. Now I'm told in the time left there's some time for Q&A. Now, I'm not turning into a cult leader by putting on these glasses, but the light is on me and I can see you guys better. So if there's any questions, I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm game. The young lady with the mask.
Do you think there's
Oh, I'm sorry, the young person with the mask. Go ahead.
Do you think there's any possibility that there could be redevelopment of the parking lots at the current White Sox Stadium to keep them here?
Well, it's yes to the first part, maybe no to the second part. The question was, is there a possibility of redeveloping the lots around White Sox Stadium? Yes. In order to keep them there, right now, no. But there ought to be. That makes the most sense. 70 acres of parking around Old White Sox Stadium, that's a neighborhood. And the odd thing about it is that, the White Sox don't like to, they can't draw a crowd. It's the team, man. It's the team. And I say that as a White Sox fan. It's the team. It's the team. But they can't draw a crowd. But who wants to come? And they've improved this stadium since the original. But you've got this boulder sitting in a sea of concrete. Who wants to go there when Wrigley is in a neighborhood? So the idea of building a neighborhood around it would be great, except the problem has historically been Jerry Reinsdorf and his organization, although the stadium and the park and the parking are owned by the Illinois Sports Facilities Authority, it's publicly owned, he has a concession on parking. So who's going to take money out of their own pocket, right? So that's part of the problem. Somehow the ISFA, the governor, and the mayor have to break that logjam and say, listen, it has to be here, and this is what you got to do. Yes, the young man with the, yes.
Do you think that the temporary casino will be the permanent casino?
Yeah, I actually think so. I think that the temporary casinos in Medina Temple, the old Medina Temple, Bloomingdale's, spent some time as a Bloomingdale's store. I think that's probably as good as it's going to get, frankly. And even that's not making the money that they thought it was going to make. So they'll be lucky to be able to stay there. But yeah, I think that's the casino. They just haven't really told us yet. I'm sorry, there's somebody called my name. Yes.
So 34 years ago, the Sox moved the stadium across the street and wiped out a whole neighborhood. And then the police department moved out to 35th and Wabash and wiped out a whole neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That was my old high school, De La Salle High School.
Yeah.
Good, but what do you think the best solution is for the Bears and the White Sox? What do they do?
Good question. I thought the best solution for the Bears, I've been a Bears fan since watching Bob Avellini overthrow James Scott as wide receiver back in the 70s. I've been a Bears fan for a long time. I thought Arlington Heights was the solution. The problem is that the Bears were told, a source told me who has direct knowledge, they said, listen, you guys are not land developers. And so you better take the bird that's in the hand. But I thought Arlington Heights was the best thing. If it has to stay in the city, I thought Southworks on the south side was good, the old U.S. Steel plant. And of course, there's always been environmental problems there. But now, Governor Pritzker is bringing in a quantum computing facility there of some size, at least looking to. So somehow you can remediate these things. So if I had my druthers, the Bears would have gone there, Southworks, and the Sox would stay where they are. They haven't earned the right to reach into your pocket. I mean, they don't have it in the first place, my God, but I don't know, it shouldn't be about the quality of the team, but it is. That sticks in my craw. I might have given Bill Veeck a stadium if he asked for one, right? But not these guys. So that's what I think. That's what I think. I saw a hand. I'm sorry, I don't want to say. Oh, there's with a green shirt, maybe? I don't know.
You know, it's kind of frustrating that our legislators do not listen to the people. I mean, these seem to be like boondaggles. Like regarding that Saks deal, former Governor, Pat Quinn wants to maybe you've heard, wants to place a referendum.
Yes.
On a coming ballot about whether the people think that that type of Saks deal should be funded or not, or we should fund stadiums. I mean, if many people are against it, why are these? I suppose that these deals are being made for profit. I mean, I don't understand why they don't come to the people to ask, and there are these deals often that happen behind these closed doors.
Good question. Good question. And the reason why they don't come to the people is that, as the system is showing you, they don't have to. They don't have to ask you and I what they think of it when they can ask elected officials and use their own power and influence to make things happen. And as a result, you go the path of least resistance. And then they'll be armed with their own polls and studies saying certain percentage of fans want to have the stadium and don't want. I mean, they'll have their research to kind of help give some cover to what they want to do. But that's really the reason why. Gosh, I hate to sound so cynical about these things. But if we're going to change things and create a more equitable city and have equity mean something other than something that's said at a boardroom or at a conference, not this one, then then there's going to be some tough decisions that elected officials are going to have to make, and that people as voters are going to have to hold them to the fire about. Because believe me, if an elected official says, "I want to put public housing in my ward," they're going to hear from folk, right? And they're going to say, "Listen, I got to back away from that," and which has happened in the city before, time and time again. So the idea is that you have to bring that kind of pressure to bear. Gosh, speaking of time, I think I ran out of time. But thank you.